Wonderful. Okay, we are 3 minutes after 2, and recognizing we'd like to keep ourselves on schedule, I would love to get started. So for those of you who I've not had the pleasure of working with or meeting before, my name is Jennifer Robbins. I'm the Director of Business Development, and I'm our not-for-profit and education lead. It is so wonderful to see so many faces that I've seen virtually over the past 2.5 years, and it is my immense pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, our not-for-profit speaker. I have Natasha Bowes here, Senior Manager of Philanthropy from Second Harvest, and I know her session, there's going to be a lot of really wonderful learnings, and I'm so thrilled to present our Data for Good session. So please give a warm round of applause for Natasha.
All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for coming to our session about Second Harvest. I'm not sure if you know, but there are 6.7 million people in Canada that are food insecure right now, and 1.2 million of them are children. All of this is going on while we throw away 60% of all of the food produced here in Canada. So instead of using it to feed people, we just throw it away. This food here, if you guys have a chance to come and look afterwards, is all food that's going to be thrown away, including these grapes. I took them home last night after visiting the warehouse, and my son actually packed most of them for his snack. So it's 100% completely good, edible, delicious food that needs to be eaten. Second Harvest believes that technology and innovation have the power to solve problems, especially hunger and the impact of food waste. So we're going to take a little peek into how we use data to grow our national database of donors and to use data and technology to harvest growth. Second Harvest is a charity that's been around since 1985, and we're mostly focused on rescuing food and serving people in and around the GTA. We grew nationally because of COVID and how it impacted communities across Canada, and we use our data to advance our mission and vision of no waste and no hunger. I am a fundraising professional of over 20 years. I got my CFRE this year, which was really exciting. I am a mom of 7 really awesome kids. I joined Second Harvest right at the beginning of the pandemic, so we're still a very small regional charity, which would have been really easy to manage a small pool of donors. Unfortunately, I started work the week that everyone got sent home for COVID, and we grew a little bit since then. I oversee the annual giving, legacy, and major gifts programs. Second Harvest is special because of its dual mission, the environmental protection and the hunger relief. They've developed an innovative solution that helps the environment and feeds people in our most vulnerable communities. So the big question people often ask is, what is food waste? So there's 2 types. There's avoidable and non-avoidable. Non-avoidable includes things like eggshells, bones, or peels. Unavoidable food looks like this. Believe it or not, this entire box of food and the other 52 million pounds of fresh food that we rescued this year was destined for the landfill. Why? Maybe it's not pretty enough. Maybe it's too big or too small. Maybe it's the wrong shape or the wrong color. Over 31 million tons of this food gets thrown out every year. So once the food is rescued, what happens? Well, we redistribute it to our huge network, which we call the Invisible Food Network, and it's made up of over 61,000 charities and organizations. Now, we don't reach them all yet, but we're working on it. The Invisible Food Networks includes organizations like food banks, churches, mosques, temples, senior centers, shelters, schools, and a variety of other community programs. We know the cycle of poverty is often a downward spiral, and the biggest impact is felt at the kitchen table. So when the pandemic hit, and even more people were faced with food insecurity across Canada, we knew we had to do something. Before COVID, 1 in 8 Canadian households reported food insecurity, and since COVID, is now turned to 1 in 6. Our leadership team created this amazing 3-year expansion plan, and COVID had a different idea. We ended up having to pivot our plans drastically because communities all across Canada were hit really hard by the pandemic. Our immediate goal was leave no one behind, and that's exactly what we did. We expanded nationally in the span of 3 weeks instead of 3 years, and we now proudly nourish people in communities from coast to coast to coast. This is what we did this year. We rescued and redistributed over 51 million pounds of food to thousands of nonprofits across Canada. We partnered with the Best of Humanity to rescue and redistribute this food using our trucks, using a couple of other vehicles, including transport trucks, sea lift, airplanes, snowmobiles, sled dogs, and our food rescue app. So while our frontline team and our leadership worked on the national expansion of our food rescue program, our little team got to work on the inside, growing our donor base to support our national expansion. We moved away from hard copy printouts of donor profiles with handwritten notes and our little spreadsheets into a real database. We reached out to the team at Environics to help us learn about our donors. We did a market research survey, and we undertook a ton of donor satisfaction surveys to various smaller segments. We asked a lot of questions, and we gathered a lot of data. And we now had all of this information about our donors, a pretty good idea about their philanthropic hopes and dreams, and a way to track and organize the data. And we had the expertise of Environics right behind us the whole time. So we started to analyze the data, and we uploaded all of the PRIZM segments to each donor's profile. This made it a lot easier to pull out, say, our monthly donors and see what those PRIZM segments were. So in F19, this is pre-COVID, when we were just a regional charity, you see a really big presence in our Eat, Play, Love, which by the sound of just that PRIZM name is just defines Second Harvest, right? It's Eat, Play, and Love. We had 5,000 donors, and our average gift was around $139. 97% of our donors were in Ontario, and mostly in the GTA. In F20 and F21, we tested a few acquisition campaigns to help us meet the national increased demand for food. 2 of those campaigns were data-driven, and thanks to Environics, we're able to successfully grow our database nationally. We achieved almost $1 million over target this year, and that's 2 million extra meals for people in need, thanks to data. This year, we saw a strong presence in that Eat, Play, Love segment. Our national donor acquisition campaigns helped grow our donor base right across Canada. Ontario now only makes up 88% of our donor base, and British Columbia jumped up to almost 5%. Our average gift also increased to $269. We've started to see sprinkles of donors right across Canada, and we now officially have at least 1 donor in every province and territory, and we rescue food in every province and territory. It's a big change. The team at Environics helped us identify our core donor base. So we have urban philanthropists, upscale families, and young urbanites and diverse donors. And we focused on 3 of those target groups for our acquisition campaign. We used a lot of the data from our market research survey and donor satisfaction surveys to figure out who the audience was that we were really speaking to. Our donor base is made of 28% male and 70% female. We also found out what part of our mission people really connected with. Was it the environmental protection or the hunger relief? And time again, through all of our surveys and all of our data collection efforts, we saw hunger relief coming through as what people really wanted to support. With this key information and our PRIZM data, we worked with Canada Post on a PRIZM-based targeted acquisition campaign. With a small budget and a big country, we targeted specific segments across 8 provinces. We mailed 100,000 pieces to our 3 main PRIZM acquisition groups. 61% of those letters went out to Ontario residents, since we knew they already knew about Second Harvest and supported us. 11% of the donations came from BC, and 8% came from Alberta donors. So we can see for sure targeting those upscale families in BC and Ontario worked because both of those PRIZM segments and groups came through really well for us. With this direct mail piece, we saw an average gift of $133, which is 3 times higher than our usual acquisition campaign gifts. We learned a lot from this campaign, and we learned a lot about our donors, which we then turned to use to inform our monthly donor acquisition campaign. Monthly donors are the heart of the harvest. They're everything we do at Second Harvest. Monthly donations are sometimes easier for families to manage. It's a smaller amount every single month instead of one bigger gift they may not be able to afford. Our campaign had a goal of growing by 130 new monthly donors. We wrote scripts and direct mail pieces based off of the PRIZM data and our survey data. And our telemarketing team spent over 300 hours on the phones using those scripts. And all of this resulted in 389 new monthly donors across Canada who help us rescue enough food to make over 9,000 meals per month. In F21, we had an average of 832 monthly donors. Now we have 1,202 monthly donors. Our data-driven campaign helped us to acquire more monthly donors in almost every single province and territory. Finding a monthly donor in Saskatchewan is my personal F23 goal. Altogether, our monthly donors rescue enough food, they rescue enough food to make over 65,000 meals a month. Our upcoming projects include acquiring all the donors. We need to find some monthly donors in Saskatchewan. We need to analyze who bought our sweepstakes tickets and attended our past events so we can help those revenue lines also grow. We need to look at the signature event Toronto Taste in hopes that we can leverage some of that data to grow our internal database and to grow our list of donors in the GTA. We need to plan on improving our prospect identification and cultivation, and we're going to do that using the Environics donor rank tool. And we're also using the donor rank tool to inform legacy pipelines. We're going to analyze giving trends and use the data to inform future campaigns. And as we acquire all of these new donors, we're going to be able to survey them, find out their PRIZM codes, and be able to do the analysis and keep growing over and over again. We're going to use all of these projects and more to use data to advance our vision of no waste and no hunger. So they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but this one usually leaves me pretty speechless. It's actually a ship unloading food to Nunavut. This happened a couple of months ago. And the barge is actually going to be unloaded by hand instead of using machinery because they don't have that kind of stuff up there. And then they redistribute it through the communities. So we learned a lot more through these data-driven projects, and the team at Environics really helped us. We got a much better understanding of who our donors are, why they support our cause. We learned about our core target groups and how to interact with them. And we learned all about the donor rank tool and how it can help us develop our major donor pipeline. And the PRIZM data really helped us to develop predictive analysis and guided our F23 fund development strategies. So we're now officially 22 days into F23, and we have a goal of rescuing over 55 million pounds of food this year. And we're going to redistribute that also all across Canada. We're also going to find a monthly donor in Saskatchewan and lots of more donors all across Canada. We look forward to geeking out over all of the data with the team at Second Harvest so that we can help achieve its goal and ultimately our vision of no waste and no hunger. So with that, I really appreciate you guys coming to our session. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions, and if you have any ideas, please share it away.
Great presentation and great organization. Thank you. having worked in the nonprofit space in the past, I know the challenges of that Quebec market specifically. Were you able to learn any insights onto why it doesn't seem like their donor rates are as high as other places in Canada?
The Quebec market?
Yes.
So I'm from Quebec. Uh, we on purpose did not include Quebec as part of our acquisition strategy just because it is so difficult. Instead, we just focused on working with Moisson, who's already built a huge network of donors in Quebec, and that's their food bank. So instead of trying to go into this new market where we didn't know, we weren't even French, like we were a tiny little regional charity. We would have had to spend so much money on all of the acquisition campaigns to be translated, our donor pages translated, our onboarding series translated, our thank you cards translated, and then I'm the only one that speaks French because, again, we're a tiny little team. So we just opted out of Quebec for right now. I didn't help, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm curious to know if you have any data about the positive carbon impact of rescuing the food versus what I imagine is a negative impact of transportation and distribution of the rescued food.
Absolutely, that's an amazing question. So our fleet is actually working to be completely non-gas. We're looking to switch our fleet over to electric vehicles. And we also work a lot with Uber Freight. So when food is being delivered one way, or things are being delivered one way, the truck comes back empty. So we work with Uber to fill up that truck with food, so it's already traveling that way. We're just filling it up and using up the space, so we're saving, if that makes sense, yeah. And our entire fleet, we're looking to switch over to be biodiesel, I believe, and electric, depending on what the vehicle is.
I'm wondering what your relationship is with, or was with Environics during the analysis process. Like, were you yourself in the Envision platform doing this analysis, or was the relationship much like working closer together with Environics? Just
Yeah.
especially at the beginning of the pandemic when you grew so much and were doing this analysis at the same time. It just seems incredible.
Yeah, it was busy for sure. Candace and Jennifer were on speed dial the entire time, but we were able to take our entire database and send it over to them and have them working on that kind of stuff while our internal team got the new, so we switched over to Razor's Edge NXT. So that was also a huge project. So they were able to gather all the data and all the fact finding for us, and then we came back together, had a couple of meetings where they presented their results, and then we're able to take it from there, and that's where we kind of took it and ran. But Candace and Jennifer supported through our Canada Post meetings. They were able to send data straight to Canada Post. Like, it took us out of a lot of the juggling pieces. We also didn't have a lot of staff during that time because obviously COVID, and we're all working from home. So they were incredible throughout the entire thing.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Boxing from United Way Canada. So as we know that United Ways run the campaigns. So although I'm not in charge of the department, but I'm dealing with the campaign data. So I'm interested in the data-driven campaigns. It's good to share more details about that. So from my imagination, that maybe from the design, so the data-driven, so you know who your target is, and more the people come and leave their information, and you can collect their information, can make a further analysis. This is from my perspective, but I would like to know more details about that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I would like to know the details about data-driven campaigns. So how you design that, and what kind of the deep data you're using for that.
So our digital, we went through a lot of turnover at Second Harvest during this time. So we had a marketing team that started with their digital campaigns, and we switched over to a different marketing team that supported us with that. But a lot of it was done through Facebook. So we did go and see that Facebook, most of our users were on it. We do have that older demographic of donors. So we did a lot of digital campaigns just through Facebook targeting. We also opened up an online store, and we were able to target specific markets of that online store PRIZM markets mostly, and drive people to that store, which just ended up being a different acquisition strategy for us, which worked really well, especially peak pandemic. We actually did a waste-wise acquisition campaign, which is also targeted towards PRIZM codes, which I didn't include on here, but it was a really great campaign, and especially during COVID when people were stuck at home, that's the time they were making bread, they were growing their leftovers, lettuce on their windowsills and everything. So we really took that time where people were stuck at home and we talked to them about how to compost at home, how to reduce your food waste at home, where to put stuff in the fridge so it doesn't go bad really fast, how to store your strawberries. So we were able to engage donors in a lot of different ways and potential new donors. So we tried to do a couple of different feeler campaigns and ended up doing digital acquisition that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jay Terrell from Esri Canada. So interestingly, you talking about donors, I assume you're talking about monetary donors,
Yes.
like myself or John or somebody as a citizen who cares about one of the two categories you described. But there's also, I assume, the food donors, right? Whether they be restaurants or retailers or some other source.
Yeah.
How are you, when you're expanding, if you grow out of Toronto, handling the logistics of the transportation from, say, the food source to the recipients and maybe a stop along the way if you're doing some sort of prep activity? That must be very complex, is it, to consider and to kind of keep the impact to a minimum, right?
We have an entire food procurement team. So I procure the donors, I get the money. They deal with the food. So they work with a lot with different branches, let's say Sobeys or Loblaws or even bigger. So Air Canada became a huge donor during that time. So a lot of the food that we work with is through the app. So a charity in Nunavut can sign up for our app and say, I'm willing to go pick up food in this region. And then the charity or the restaurant or farmer or whoever it is will go from that region as well and say, I have a donation of this food and anybody from this region can pick it up. So our app really helped us to kind of merge those two worlds. So we have the needs that are out there and we've got now grocery stores, Shoppers Drug Mart, IKEA, tons of organizations that give us all of their surplus food, and we just match them up. Yeah, for trips on the sea lift and like going up to Nunavut, obviously we have to work a lot more closely with like expiry dates and sustainable food. We were able to do a lot of work this year actually to find food that is appropriate for specific regions or cultures. Like we had salmon. We had so much salmon, and we wanted to ship it up to Nunavut, and they were very clearly able to tell us, we can't have this kind of salmon, we prefer this kind of salmon, just because it was more culturally appropriate for them. So we're able to redistribute that food up to them in a way that was important to them to have it received.
Thanks. If I heard you correctly, you're not using donor rank right now to do major gift prospecting, but you're hoping to?
My donor gifts person starts on Monday.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. How do you think that's going to work in
It's going to be
identifying
amazing.
prospects?
It's going to, like I've explained to him during the interviews, I'm like, you're walking into a gold mine. So we have our full list of donors. We're able to rank them. So all the fives who have the affinity or the ability to give and the income and things like that. And then we're able to match that up with our data to say, okay, Bob's been giving for this many years. And look, now he can give this high of a gift. We never thought to ask him that because he's always been giving this certain amount every year. We've got a lot of those donors in there right now that are giving $100 or $200. Now we can see the capacity that they have. Now that we're getting a new major gifts person, we'll be able to kind of just get him to sway them to, feed a little more people.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's better.
So, I'm actually first going to answer that Quebec question for you. Since I've been at EA for 8.5 years, I've worked quite extensively with not-for-profit world. You can probably talk to anybody, any of our clients in this room who operate in Quebec, and they will tell you that the Quebec market is very, very different from the rest of Canada. From a fundraising perspective, there's a few reasons for this. One, household incomes are lower in Quebec than they are in the rest of Canada. So if you look at that average household income, it is lower. Number two, there are two key social values in Quebec that pop up strongly across the board. One of them is parochialism, and that's an affinity for a connection to your local region and wanting to support basically Quebec or the region in Quebec that you're from. So there's certainly some limitations when you're talking about a national organization or an international organization. And the second one is they're very strong in active government, which means that it's deep, firmly held belief that the government should be looking after these causes. And so this is why not-for-profits struggle with that fundraising perspective in Quebec, because that mentality, that value is just, it's not the same as outside of Canada. So thank you for that great question. And in that vein, Natasha, rock star, fabulous presentation. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. Thank you all for bringing those. I know I said this to you, but I was so incredibly excited to have Natasha and the team here and everyone who got their personal invite from me. I'm sure you noticed my 2-paragraph note specifically about the session, so thank you so much for joining. I know on the screen, I think, in a moment, we'll be popping up the next sessions. There is no session in this room, so if you would like to take the opportunity to speak with Natasha afterwards, please do come forward. But otherwise, there's 2 fantastic sessions next door, and I think we've got a very quick turnaround, so we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day.